My name is Julia Sanders. I'm 35 years old and used to be a fashion designer living under the bright lights of Broadway, until I gave it all up to become the perfect wife for a wealthy family in Seattle, my husband's family. I used to believe that sacrificing for love was noble, until a message popped up on my husband's phone while he was in the shower. Last night was amazing. I can still taste you. The sender, his biological cousin, Carly. Have you ever given up everything for someone only to find out you were just a shadow, a facade in a carefully scripted family play? If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people who called you family, stay with me. I'll tell you what happened when I decided to stop staying silent. I used to have a small studio in Brooklyn flooded with natural light and half-finished sketches. Every morning I'd brew coffee, play jazz, and ask myself what I'd create today with the new French lace I'd just received. Life wasn't wealthy back then, but I felt full. I felt alive. Then I met Mark. He showed up at a charity fashion show, wearing a light gray suit, smiling politely, and listening to me talk for hours about classic silhouettes. I didn't realize it at the time, but the best parts of me were starting to be reshaped. Slowly, gently, and very effectively. I need someone who understands the value of stability, Mark said after a few months of dating. My family, they're not like any you've known. But if you love me, you'll understand. I loved him, so I believed him. I left New York, sold the studio, shelved my designs, and moved to Seattle. The day I arrived at the ivory-colored mansion in the city's northern district, his mother, Lorraine, looked me up and down as if evaluating a product she hadn't ordered. "Too thin," she said. "Not sure she'll stand out during our social events." Mark laughed, wrapped his arm around me, and joked, "Come on, Mom, Julia's a fashion model." I laughed along, trying not to show my discomfort. That first year of marriage, I spent most of my time learning how to become a Sanders, hosting guests, memorizing every name in Mark's contact list, knowing which wine Mr. Richard, my father-in-law, preferred, and how Lorraine always insisted the table be set by family standard. No one forced me, but I understood. If I wanted to be accepted, I had to adapt. I thought if I tried hard enough, they'd see me as one of them. But in Lorraine's eyes, I was never a Sanders. I was Julia, Mark's wife. She never said it outright, but every time someone new came over, she'd introduce me with a line like, "She used to work in fashion. She stays at home now, helps Mark in little ways, I suppose." I once spoke up. "I'm managing the company's media campaigns. I also redesigned the website." She shrugged. "Well, that's still just helping out." Mark never intervened. He'd pull me close at night and whisper softly, "You're doing great. But you know, my mom's not easy." There were nights I'd lie awake, my hand resting on my belly, the place where 2 pregnancies had already ended. I drank the tea Lorraine made, followed the traditional Eastern medicine method passed down in the family. I didn't question anything. I wanted to be a mother, to bring a child into this world who might finally make me belong. But every effort ended in tears, alone in cold hospital rooms, while Mark was always away on urgent business. After the 3rd miscarriage, Lorraine walked into my room while I was asleep on the couch. She didn't ask how I was or offer any comfort. She said, "Maybe not everyone is chosen to carry on the bloodline." I had nothing left to say. I remember gripping the towel in my hand so tightly my palm started bleeding, and I didn't even notice. The next day, Carly moved in with us. She was Mark's beloved cousin, once studied abroad in Italy and had broken off an engagement with a wealthy businessman because he didn't understand the value of family. She smiled brightly, hugged me tight when we reunited. "I've always admired you and Mark. Your love is what I look up to." I hugged her back, making space in my heart so she could step in. I didn't know. I was clearing the path for someone else. But it would all come to light. Every sweet word, every warm hug, every teacup Lorraine served, had its part in a performance for which I was the only one who didn't get a script. I started suspecting, not because Mark suddenly became distant, he'd never truly been close, but because of Carly's silence. The woman who used to chatter nonstop about coworkers, about finding her own apartment, about how my dresses were elegantly enviable, went quiet. She still lived in the house, still called me Julia, still smiled at breakfast. But the way she looked at Mark when he poured coffee, the way they avoided holding eye contact when I was present, made my skin crawl. One evening in early March, Mark told me he had to check the company's server system. Internal audit coming up. I kissed his cheek and quietly activated Mark's iCloud tracker on an old iPad he'd forgotten to log out of. The blinking dot wasn't at the office. It was parked at a luxury condo near Lake Union, a neighborhood Mark once told me was not safe, don't come late. I tapped for details. The address sent a chill down my spine. Carly had once used that exact address on a library card application. I remembered because I had been her sponsor. I grabbed the car keys and drove. Seattle at night was cold and thick with mist. I wasn't planning to confront, I just needed to see, with my own eyes. By the time I arrived, Mark's SUV was already there. A warm yellow glow came from the sixth-floor window. I could see shadows moving inside. I stood in the rain, hands clutching the wheel, then slowly drove away. The next morning I entered my small home office in the mansion to check our company's bank account. Both Mark and I had access, but he was the main administrator. I had never thought of checking on him until then. Every month on the 3rd, there was a temporary assistance payment transferred from the joint account to a personal account under the name C.M. Harrington, Carly's full surname. Each transfer was $7,500. For the past 11 months, I printed the statements, marked every entry, then sat frozen for hours, unable to breathe. Those numbers weren't just money. They were a confession without words. I thought I had no strength left. Until I received an email from the clinic, where Carly had once listed me as her emergency contact. She said she had hormonal issues, needed routine checkups. Subject line, appointment confirmation, prenatal ultrasound, Carly Harrington. Appointment date, January 16th. I had to read it 3 times. January 16th. I was in the hospital because of my 3rd miscarriage. Mark didn't come. He texted that he was meeting with a financial advisor in Bellevue. I remember it clearly because that night I cried until I could barely breathe, alone in the waiting room, still clutching the hand towel he had forgotten the day before. I don't know how long I cried after reading that email. I only remember the sound of water running endlessly from the kitchen faucet, and the coffee stains spreading across the floor. Spilled at some point without me noticing. I sat there, like someone who had just pulled the knife from her own chest, trying to understand how people could be this cruel. Carly was pregnant, and the baby wasn't some stranger's. It wasn't an accident. It was the result of a plan carefully cultivated inside the home I had tried so hard to turn into a family. That home turned out to be a stage, and I was the extra, standing uselessly at the edge of the curtain. It felt like nothing could hurt more than realizing the one you loved had betrayed you. But the deepest pain is facing the truth and realizing no one stands with you. That night, I didn't wait for Mark to come home. I called Carly out to the backyard. She stepped out, hair tied neatly, holding a glass of orange juice like she had just walked out of a maternity ad. I didn't say much. I only asked, "The baby is Mark's, isn't it?" Carly looked at me for a few seconds, then smirked. "You're not as clueless as I thought." Then she took a sip and added, "Mark chose me. You're the title, the face, but I'm the one he stays with after the party." I didn't know what infuriated me more, her indifference or the way she said Mark's name like I'd never existed. "I helped you, Carly. I was the one who took you to your appointments, who cooked, cleaned, shared my bathroom with you." She laughed. "You think I needed you? I'm here for Mark. And if you're smart, you'll step out of this game like a lady." Nausea rose to my throat. I turned and went back inside, hands clenched so tight they drew blood. The next morning I went to speak with my mother-in-law. Lorraine was pruning roses in the garden, wearing cream-colored silk gloves, her vintage perfume thick in the air. "I need to talk to you," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "About Carly and Mark." She ignored me completely, focusing on snipping each stem with perfect precision. "It's between you and your husband. I don't interfere." "This isn't private anymore," I said. "Carly is pregnant with your son's child." Her scissors froze. But only for a second. Sanders don't divorce, she said slowly, turning to face me. We don't let petty issues affect the family image. If you plan to make a scene, remember whose house you're living in. I stood there in the morning sun as if slapped by words that didn't need to be shouted. I used to think Lorraine disliked me because I wasn't like them, but the truth was, I had never been seen as a person. I was just a decorative part of an estate they had designed long before I arrived. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Matt Carley's ex-brother-in-law, the one who had vanished from family events without a trace. Julie, I heard what happened, he said, voice low, tinged with sympathy. I know you're hurting, but don't for a second think Carley is a victim. She did the same thing to my family. She drove two sisters apart and vanished once she got what she wanted. What did you say? She always targets men who are already taken, and she knows how to make the other woman walk away out of dignity. I don't know what she's trying to pull now, but if you do leave, at least take the truth with you. The call ended. I set the phone down, but my hands were still shaking. I wasn't the first, only the next. And if I stayed quiet, someone after me would bleed too. But the most painful part was the isolation. Mark didn't ask why I wasn't speaking. Didn't ask why I stopped holding him at night. He kept his face in his phone, smiling softly every time Carley texted. Lorraine stopped inviting me to breakfast. The housekeeper, who used to call me Miss Julia, now looked at me with pity, like I was a cast member who hadn't accepted her role was over. And Carley still walked around the house like it had always been hers. I started eating alone, sleeping on the couch. The same person who redesigned that kitchen, who placed every flower vase on that dining table, now no different than a nameless maid. But in that isolation, something awakened. I had hit rock bottom, and once you hit the bottom, there's only one direction left to climb. I went quiet, not the silence of hurt anymore, it was the silence of someone watching. I woke earlier than Mark, made coffee like usual, set the table like always, and while he slept, I quietly reinstalled tracking software on the iPad still stored in our shared office, an asset I had legal access to under the home purchase agreement. Every message, email, calendar appointment was routed to a secure account set up by my lawyer. I didn't cry anymore when I read Mark's message to Carley. Mom says as long as she signs the resignation letter at the company, everything will go smoothly. Or the line Carley replied with, I think she's starting to suspect, should we push the plan forward? I didn't know exactly what the plan was, but I knew I was running out of time. I scheduled a meeting with a private attorney named Eleanor Price, a former federal financial prosecutor who now ran a small firm specializing in divorce cases involving abuse and hidden finances. Eleanor listened to me talk for nearly an hour without interrupting. When I finally stopped, she simply nodded. We need evidence, clear and indisputable. She walked me through each step: gather account statements, screenshot messages, log access history, and archive internal company transfers. I started with the finance department of Sanders Logistics, where I still held the title of co-founder, even though I had long been excluded from all key meetings. The current CFO, Noah, was the only person in the company who had ever shown me kindness. I invited Noah to lunch, saying I wanted to support the company's charity initiatives. When we sat down, I asked, Noah, has the company made any significant expenditures lately, especially international ones? Noah hesitated, then lowered his voice. Julia, your name is still on the financial file, but recently Mark transferred over $400,000 to an account in the Caymans listed as an investment for international market development. He paused, then exhaled. Personally, I find it odd, but I can't intervene without a formal request from you. I clenched my hands beneath the table. I understand, and I'll send that request through proper channels. That evening, I sat in my old office, dim light filtering through the window frame. On the screen were bank statements, emails downloaded from iCloud, and message threads with eerily aligned timestamps. Every time I had a miscarriage, Mark was on a business trip, and Carley was conveniently out sick. In a stack of old HR records, I found a name that had quietly been erased from the Sanders family's company history: Grace Molina, a former PR staffer who had once been accused of mishandling a public relations crisis. I remembered Grace because I once saw her crying in the restroom, right after Carly had exited the boardroom looking very satisfied. I found Grace on LinkedIn. We met at a small cafe in Capitol Hill. At first, she was cautious. But when I told her I too had become a victim of a similar setup, she looked at me for a long time, then pulled a USB drive from her wallet. The day I left, I recorded a conversation between me and Carly. Grace said, "I never intended to use it, but if it helps you reclaim some truth, I don't need to keep it anymore." I went home and played the recording. Carly's voice rang out, clear, confident, not a flicker of hesitation. "If you want to keep a man, don't be stupid enough to actually get pregnant. Smart women use that as a weapon. Fake pregnancies, fake pain, fake heartbreak. Men love the victim role." I sat there, head in hands, heart pounding. She hadn't simply betrayed me, she had manipulated everything, staged every tear, every complaint, every time she called me the sister I trust most. And Mark believed her. While I had spent all that time blaming myself for not being good enough to hold a family together, that night I slept on the sofa. Not because I'd been pushed out of the bedroom like before, but because I knew starting tomorrow everything would change. But I had to do it right, make it solid and ruthless, in the kindest way possible. 2 weeks later, while I was still quietly gathering documents and playing the role of the trustworthy wife, Lorraine knocked on my office door, holding a shimmering gold invitation box. "Catherine will turn 95 early next month," she said, placing the invitation flat on my desk like a verdict. "The party will be at the old estate in Lake Chelan. All the grandchildren are expected, and I hope you and your husband will attend." I looked up at my mother-in-law. Her face was expressionless, but the way she emphasized husband and wife caught in my throat. I gave a small nod. "Of course, it's an important occasion." She smiled, a polite, icy smile. "I'm glad you understand. Catherine still thinks of you as part of the family. Let's not disappoint her." I knew exactly what this was. She didn't need me there to celebrate, she needed me there to maintain the illusion of the Sanders legacy. Same old game. Perfect family, united descendants, no scandals, no cracks. I wasn't going to help stage that play. That night I wrote 2 letters. No flowery language, no dramatics, just calm, factual reports. One was for Caitlin Dorsey, a veteran journalist from Forbes who had interviewed Mark 2 years ago about his international expansion strategy. The other was for Jeremy Nash, a senior investigator with the Internal Revenue Service, who had handled cases of undisclosed transfers in the Seattle area. I didn't beg them to act. I simply attached a set of preliminary files, documents I had carefully organized, encrypted, time-stamped, showing suspicious cash flows between internal accounts, along with location histories and images extracted from cloud data. The final line of each letter read, "I don't know if this truth is big enough for anyone to care, but if I'm right, this isn't just a family matter. It's a matter of justice." I sent the letters using a private address Eleanor had provided. Proper format, proper procedure, no trace. Then I closed the laptop and returned to the performance. Each morning, I had breakfast with Mark as if nothing had changed. I still made his favorite coffee, half shot of espresso, light on sugar, oat milk foam. I listened to him complain about difficult clients, about Carly acting moody from hormone shifts, about his mother wanting the birthday party perfect enough to make the local paper. I nodded, smiled, and suggested napkin colors. I even went with Mark to the fitting for his suit for Catherine's birthday, still linked arms with him as we exited the tailor. His friends, mostly business partners, still looked at us with admiration. A beautiful, stable, successful couple. No one saw me each night, lying with my back to Mark, clutching my phone, waiting for Eleanor's confirmation that every document had passed legal review. No one saw the look in Mark's eyes when he texted under the table, phone hidden beneath a napkin, fingers moving fast, expression unchanged, still playing the perfect husband. But I saw everything, and I documented it all. The drive to Lake Chelan took 3 hours. Mark drove. I sat silently in the passenger seat. As the car wound through pine-covered hills, he turned to me. Thank you for coming. Mom will be happy, and so will Grandma Catherine. I turned to him and smiled. I think this time will be unforgettable. He didn't suspect a thing. I glanced at the rearview mirror, seeing the luggage strapped tightly. Inside was my personal laptop, a hard drive with all the backup files, and an encrypted USB drive fitted with an auto signal device in case of disconnection. The game they had forced me into for the past 5 years was nearing its end, but this time, I wasn't a pawn. And I didn't need anyone to save me. Grandma Catherine's birthday party was held outdoors, beneath a glass canopy draped in lavender blooms and ivory silk. The late afternoon sun filtered through champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a violin gave the illusion of a picture-perfect family celebrating their beloved matriarch. I remained at the center table, my smoke-gray silk gown catching the breeze. Mark held my hand as if we were a devoted couple. Carly sat a few tables away, her belly slightly rounded, smiling softly every time someone offered congratulations. Lorraine scanned the crowd, adjusting Mark's sleeve as if shielding him from some unspoken threat. I took in every detail, how seamlessly they all played their roles, to the point they forgot it was all just a performance. Then came the slideshow tribute for Grandma Catherine. Richard, Mark's grandfather, gave a heartfelt introduction. Then he gestured for me, the gracious daughter-in-law, to lead the special segment I had prepared to honor the family's journey. I stood and slowly walked to the small stage. On screen appeared our wedding photo, mine and Mark's, the same one printed on our first Christmas card. Applause echoed. Someone whispered, "Feels like yesterday." So do I. Everything seems unchanged, until you start looking closely. I clicked to the next slide. The screen instantly showed a video, Mark sitting on a bed in a luxury condo, Carly wrapped in silk, holding a glass of red wine. They were laughing. Then Carly looked straight at the hidden camera. Her voice rang out, crisp and clear. Lorraine said, "As long as Julia signs the resignation, the company will be handed over to me. We'll own everything." The party froze. Lorraine shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "Stop this, turn it off." I turned to face her. "You told me to protect the family's image. I did. When my husband slept with his cousin. When I lost our child and you said, 'There'll be another time.' I stayed silent, but not today." I clicked again. Now the screen showed financial statements, monthly transfers from the company's account to Carly's personal one. Several entries were marked in red, with notes, "No board approval." Then came ultrasound images, 2 of them. One from my hospital, dated January 16th, the day I was admitted for a miscarriage. The other from Carly, the same date, same time. And an email from Carly to Mark. "I think we should make a fake scan just in case someone asks. My belly isn't showing yet." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Richard collapsed into a chair, his face pale. Mark stepped onto the stage, voice low, trying to keep his composure. "Julia, you're destroying everything in front of the whole family." I looked him in the eye. "What you call a family destroyed me. This time, I'm just returning the truth." I clicked once more. The screen displayed 2 documents, the divorce petition enforcing our prenuptial clause on infidelity, alongside legal files my attorney had prepared, and a formal complaint of financial misconduct submitted to the IRS, clearly addressed to Jeremy Nash. The once stiff atmosphere cracked, then crumbled, chaos erupted. Lorraine staggered, Carly clutched her belly as if in pain, but I knew it wasn't a contraction. It was fear. Everything they'd tried to hide behind the curtain of dignity and Sanders' bloodline was now exposed. Every number, every word, every lie, preserved on a hard drive I had spent nearly a year compiling. After the party, everything unraveled faster than I expected. 2 days later, Mark showed up at my mother's house on Bainbridge Island, where I was staying. He came alone, no lawyer, no defense, only the weary face of a man stripped of every illusion. "Julia, you can't do this," he said, his voice hoarse. "The media's all over the company. Investors are pulling out. If you withdraw the complaint, if you give me time to fix things, I'll transfer all my personal assets to you, I swear." I looked at the man who had once been my husband. The one who used to place his hand on my belly every time I thought I might be pregnant. The one who cried when we lost our first baby. But now, all I saw was a stranger. "You don't need to give me anything," I said calmly. "I didn't do this for money. I did it to take back what I lost, my dignity, my voice, and the truth." He bowed his head, exhaled. "You're tearing my whole family apart." I clenched my fists, the words slicing out like cold steel. "No, you did that. When you slept with Carly, when you let your mother decide my worth, when you smiled at her in that clinic while I bled alone in the bathroom." Mark said nothing more, and I didn't wait for him to. I closed the door, on him, and on the life I had been dragged into as a stand-in. The next afternoon I was folding clothes into a suitcase when Eleanor called. "Julia, the court has officially frozen all of Mark's personal assets pending investigation," she said. "I just received a copy of the judge's order. We're halfway there." I sank onto the edge of the bed, still holding the old wool scarf I once knitted for Mark every winter. Part of me wanted to cry in relief. Another part felt hollow, like something fundamental had been carved out of me. I remembered what my mother once told me. Forgiveness is for yourself, not for them. But you can only forgive once you've looked at the wound and no longer fear it. I hadn't forgiven. And maybe I never would. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Lorraine's stare. Not of Mark's empty promises. Not of the hands that pretended to lift me up while pushing me down. They thought I'd stay quiet, because they mistook me for the version they created. The agreeable wife, the obedient daughter-in-law, the woman who knew how to retreat when hurt. They didn't realize? I had gone so far, there was no way back. And that's exactly why I had nothing left to lose. Except myself, if I let them keep controlling me. That fall, I left Seattle, not to run away, not to deliver revenge and vanish. I moved to Portland, a place far enough not to run into the past by accident, but close enough not to feel like I was starting from zero. My design studio sits in an old warehouse, with sunlight streaming through the skylight, bathing rolls of linen, wool, and silk folded neatly on wooden shelves. No flashy signs. No PR campaign. Just a space to begin again, with my hands, my eyes, and the first stitches of someone no one ever believed could create beauty. I teach classes every Tuesday and Thursday, free of charge. My students are women who once fell into silence, like I did. A woman who quit her job because her husband controlled everything. A single mother whose mother-in-law forced her into an abortion. An older woman whose brother stole the family house after their parents died. We didn't talk about pain in those classes, we sewed, and with each stitch, the weight of endurance slipped from our bodies like a long exhale at the end of the day. I lived in a loft apartment near Selwood Park. I often sat by the window in the late afternoons reading while looking out at the fiery red maple trees. Every evening I played old jazz records, the same ones I used to listen to in Brooklyn. I could sleep again without dreaming of hospitals, or dinner parties where I sat beside a man who no longer loved me. Then one day I received a file from a children's advocacy center Eleanor, my attorney, had once mentioned. A 6-year-old girl, named Lily, dark brown hair, wide eyes, quiet. She'd lived in 4 foster homes. No one kept her longer than 3 months. She liked to draw, but didn't speak. I didn't know why I started crying when I saw her photo. Maybe it was her eyes, or maybe it was the crayon sketch attached. A house, and next to it 2 people holding hands. Underneath, in wobbly letters, "You don't have to be born from a mom to be one." I filed the adoption request that same day. 3 months later, Lily came to live with me. She didn't call me Mom right away, she called me Julia. But every night she'd crawl into my bed, curl up like a little kitten, and sleep soundly without waking. One night I asked her, "Why did you draw 2 people holding hands?" Lily answered, "Because one person isn't strong enough to stand if the wind blows hard." I held her close, feeling life restart. Not from a wound, but from a small hand that knew when to reach back. The Forbes interview came after that. They didn't want to write about the old scandal, but about the Healing Through Design program I had started in Portland. The young journalist asked, How did it feel to lose everything you once called family? I looked out the window, where Lily sat folding paper with women who once believed they no longer had worth. I didn't lose a family, I said slowly. I stopped living in the wrong one. I didn't lose anything. I rebuilt, brick by brick, with self-respect, truth, and love that doesn't need conditions. The article went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. A year passed. Everything felt like the aftershock of a storm long gone. But in truth, it was those fragments that carried the deepest weight. Carly lost custody after being found using unprescribed antidepressants and leaving the child alone overnight in the apartment. The court didn't need more proof. The baby was placed in her maternal grandmother's home. Mark no longer had the right to demand anything. He was convicted of corporate embezzlement and tax fraud. He received a suspended sentence with 3 years of financial supervision. I didn't attend the hearing. I heard from Eleanor, who had become my closest friend, that Lorraine was hospitalized. Pancreatic cancer, she said quietly. End stage. I spent 3 nights thinking before deciding to go. Not because I still felt anger, but because I needed to be sure I was calm enough not to carry anything toxic out of that room. Lorraine sat in a wheelchair, half her former size, her once commanding hands now trembling beneath a wool blanket. She looked up at me, unable to hide the collapse in her eyes. Julia. She said my name for the first time, without weight or warning. I was wrong. From the beginning. I thought, if I could hold the image of family together, everything would stay okay. But I forgot. The things that look most peaceful are often the most false. I said nothing. You, she continued, voice catching, you're the first Sanders to live truthfully. I quietly placed a photo on the side table. In it, I was holding Lily's hand at her design class's first exhibition. She beamed, holding a tiny dress she had sewn herself. I got up and looked at her one last time. You know, I said gently, a last name doesn't define anyone. The heart decides who family is. That afternoon, I returned to the studio. Class was starting. The women I once called students, now partners, sisters, a network holding one another up, were preparing for the hands-on session. Lily ran to me, ponytail bouncing, her smile bright. Mom, look at the dress I made. I knelt, admiring each crooked, beautiful stitch. You did amazing, I whispered. Sunlight streamed through the large glass window, laying a warm glow on the floor like silk. I looked up, surrounded by laughter and the soft hum of sewing machines. The scent of new fabric and chamomile tea mingled in the air. Like memories. But the kind I got to create. Not ones imposed on me. I didn't win anything. I kept living. And this time, it was real. What do you think about Julia's choice? If it were you, would you have the courage to walk away from a family everyone calls perfect, but that makes you lose yourself? Each person's answer may be different, but sometimes a single sentence from a stranger is enough to give someone the courage they thought they'd lost. If Julia's story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories about family, self-worth, and the journey to healing, don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss what's next. Because sometimes one story can help you see your own life in a whole new light.